Desho ask you a question that perhaps nobody has ever had the courage to ask you. Why do you keep going back to the person who hurts you? I am not talking about weakness. I am not talking about lack of self-love. I am talking about something much deeper. Something that happens inside your brain, without you noticing, without you choosing, without you being able to stop it with willpower alone. Because here is what science discovered and almost nobody told you. Your brain does not seek what is good for you. It seeks what is familiar. And if what was familiar in your life, since you were small, was pain, uncertainty, love that comes and goes, then your brain learned something devastating. That love and suffering go together. And every time you find someone who gives you that same pattern, hot and cold, present and absent, loves you and hurts you, your brain does not scream danger. It whispers, "This is home." That is not weakness. That is neuroscience. And today you are finally going to understand why this happens and what to do to change it. Tell me in the comments, have you ever stayed with someone you knew was hurting you, but simply could not leave? Right below, I have stayed, because if you have been through that, this video was made for you. Subscribe to the channel right now, because every week there is content that will change the way you understand your own mind. Let's begin. Before we go any further, I need you to understand something that most people spend their entire lives never learning. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are not incapable of love. You are simply running a program that was installed in you before you were old enough to question it, before you even had words for what you were feeling, before you understood that what was happening around you was not normal, because it was the only normal you had ever known. And that program, written in the earliest years of your life, is still running today, quietly, automatically, invisibly, shaping who you are drawn to, what you tolerate, what feels like love, what feels like home. And until you understand where that program came from and why it keeps playing, you will keep finding yourself in the same place. Different person, same pain. That ends today. In the 1980s, a psychologist named Donald Dutton conducted a study that changed the way we understand human attachment forever. He placed participants on a high, unstable suspension bridge, one that swayed and shifted, triggering physical anxiety responses, elevated heart rate, shallow breathing, heightened arousal. Then an attractive researcher approached them. Later, on a stable, low bridge, the same researcher approached different participants in a calm, neutral state. The results were extraordinary. The people on the high bridge, the ones whose bodies were flooded with anxiety and arousal, were significantly more likely to feel attraction toward the researcher. They confused the feeling of fear with the feeling of desire. Their brain took the physical sensation of danger and labeled it as connection. This is called misattribution of arousal, and it explains something crucial about why you are drawn to people who make you feel unstable. The anxiety they produce in you, the uncertainty, the hot and cold, the wondering where you stand, does not feel like a warning signal. It feels like chemistry. It feels like intensity. It feels like something real. Because your brain cannot always tell the difference between the electricity of genuine love and the electricity of fear. Now let's go deeper. Because the suspension bridge explains the chemistry, but it does not explain why some people are more vulnerable to this pattern than others. Why do some people seem to move through relationships with relative ease, while others find themselves repeatedly drawn to the same painful dynamic, with the same type of person again and again? The answer lies in what psychologists call attachment theory. In the 1960s, a British psychiatrist named John Bowlby made a discovery that would reshape the entire field of psychology. He found that the way we bond with our primary caregivers in the first years of life, the quality, consistency, and safety of that early attachment, creates a template, a blueprint, an internal map that our brain uses for the rest of our lives to navigate all future relationships. If your earliest attachment was secure, if your needs were met consistently, if love felt safe and reliable, if the people who were supposed to protect you actually did, then your brain built a map that says, relationships are safe. People can be trusted. Love does not have to hurt. But if your earliest attachment was inconsistent, if love came with conditions, if affection was unpredictable, if the people you needed most sometimes hurt you, ignored you, or were simply not there, then your brain built a very different map. A map that says, this is what love feels like. Uncertain, earned, conditional, painful. And that map, built when you were too young to question it, becomes your baseline, your normal, your home. Here is where it gets even more profound, and this is the part that most people find the hardest to accept. The brain does not simply record early experiences, it seeks to repeat them, not to punish you, not because you deserve pain, but because the brain is a pattern recognition machine, and its deepest drive is not happiness, it is resolution. Psychologists call this repetition compulsion, the unconscious tendency to recreate familiar emotional dynamics, even painful ones, in an attempt to finally resolve them. Think about that for a moment. If you grew up with a parent who was emotionally unavailable, who gave you just enough love to keep you hoping, but never enough to feel truly secure, your brain registered that dynamic as unresolved. And unresolved things demand resolution. So your brain goes looking for someone who feels familiar, someone who activates that same dynamic, someone who is just close enough to pull you in, and just distant enough to keep you reaching. And when you find that person, there is a pull that feels almost magnetic, because it is not just attraction, it is your brain saying, here is the chance to finally fix what was broken. Here is the chance to finally be enough. Here is the chance to finally make someone who feels like home choose to stay. But there is something else happening underneath all of this. Something chemical, something biological, something that makes the cycle almost physically addictive. When you are in a relationship characterized by inconsistency, by someone who sometimes gives you warmth and connection and then pulls away, your brain releases dopamine. Not when you receive the love, but when you are anticipating it. Studies show that intermittent reinforcement, reward that comes unpredictably, sometimes yes and sometimes no, produces more dopamine than consistent reward. This is the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. The slot machine that pays out every time is boring. The slot machine that pays out sometimes unpredictably, randomly, is impossible to walk away from, because every pull of the lever is charged with possibility. And every moment of coldness from someone you love, followed by a moment of warmth, is the same. Your brain floods with dopamine when they finally text back, when they finally say something kind, when they finally pull you close after days of distance, and that flood feels like relief. It feels like proof that the love is real. It feels like winning. Even though nothing has changed, even though the pattern will repeat, even though tomorrow the coldness will return. Your brain does not care. It got its hit, and now it wants another. This is why willpower alone cannot break this cycle. This is why you can know, intellectually, completely, without any doubt, that someone is not good for you, and still not be able to leave. Because you are not fighting a bad decision. You are fighting a neurological addiction. You are fighting an attachment system that was wired before you had language. You are fighting a brain that has confused familiarity with safety and intensity with love for so long that it no longer knows the difference. And telling someone in this situation to just leave, to just choose better, to just love themselves more, is like telling someone with a broken leg to just walk it off. It misses the point entirely. Healing does not begin with a decision. It begins with understanding, and understanding begins with this. What happened to you was not your fault. The wiring was not your choice. The pattern was not a reflection of your worth. It was a survival response, built by a brain that was doing its best with what it had. So what do you actually do with all of this? How do you begin to rewire a pattern that runs this deep? The first step is recognition, not blame, not shame, not judgment, just honest, clear recognition. The next time you feel that magnetic pull toward someone, that electric, urgent, can't stop thinking about them feeling, pause and ask yourself one question. Does this feel like safety? Or does this feel like familiar? Because those two things can feel identical from the inside, but they are completely different. Safety feels like calm, like ease, like being able to breathe. Familiar feels like intensity, like urgency, like you have to earn it. Learn to tell the difference. It will save you years. The second step is understanding your attachment style. Research identifies 4 main attachment styles that develop in childhood and shape our adult relationships. The first is secure attachment. People with secure attachment feel comfortable with intimacy and do not fear abandonment. They had caregivers who were consistently responsive and emotionally available. The second is anxious attachment. People with anxious attachment crave closeness but constantly fear it will be taken away. They tend to become preoccupied with relationships and are highly sensitive to any sign of withdrawal. The third is avoidant attachment. People with avoidant attachment have learned to suppress their need for closeness. They value independence, feel uncomfortable with intimacy, and tend to pull away when relationships get too close. The fourth is disorganized attachment. People with disorganized attachment experience caregivers who are both a source of comfort and a source of fear. They simultaneously crave and fear closeness, and often find themselves in relationships that feel chaotic and painful. If you recognized yourself in any of those descriptions, especially the last two, then what you have been experiencing in your relationships is not a personality flaw. It is an attachment wound, and attachment wounds can heal. But they heal through awareness, through therapy, through relationships that offer something your nervous system has never experienced before. Consistent, safe, unconditional presence. The third step is perhaps the most important, and it is the one most people skip. You have to grieve what you did not receive, not just the relationships that hurt you, but the childhood you deserved and did not have, the safety you needed and was not there, the love that should have been unconditional and came with conditions instead. Most people skip this step because it is painful, because admitting that you were hurt, really hurt, fundamentally hurt, in ways that shaped who you became, requires a kind of vulnerability that our culture does not reward. We are told to be strong, to move on, to not dwell. But unprocessed grief does not disappear. It goes underground. And from underground, it runs your choices. It pulls you toward familiar pain. It keeps you reaching for the person who will never quite let you feel safe. Because somewhere underneath it all, there's a part of you that is still that child. Still hoping that this time, finally, the love will be enough. Still hoping that if you just try harder, give more, be better, it will finally feel safe. Give that part of you what it has always needed, not another chance with the wrong person, but the truth. The truth that what happened was not because you were not enough. It was because they did not have enough to give. Here is what I want you to take from this video. The reason you attach to people who hurt you is not weakness. It is neuroscience. It is attachment theory. It is a brain doing exactly what it was trained to do, seeking the familiar, chasing resolution, flooding with dopamine in the presence of intermittent reward. But here is what science also tells us. The brain is not fixed. It is plastic. It can be rewired. New experiences, safe ones, consistent ones, loving ones, create new neural pathways, new relationships, with therapists, with friends, with partners who show up reliably. Teach your nervous system that safety is possible. That love does not have to hurt to be real. That calm is not boring. That someone who is consistently good to you is not less exciting. They are simply giving you something your nervous system has never had enough of. And learning to receive that, learning to stay when something feels safe instead of running toward what feels familiar, is the work. It is slow work. It is uncomfortable work. But it is the most important work you will ever do. Before you go, I want to ask you something directly. What is one relationship pattern in your life that you now see differently after watching this video? Write it in the comments. Not for me. For you. Because naming it, seeing it clearly for the first time, is the beginning of the end of it. If this video gave you something real, something that made you feel less alone, less broken, more understood, hit the like button. It takes 1 second, and it helps this message reach someone who is lying awake tonight wondering why they cannot stop loving someone who keeps hurting them. Subscribe to the channel. Every week we go deeper into the psychology that explains why you are the way you are, and what you can actually do about it. No empty motivation, no quick fixes, just the truth. And the truth, even when it is hard, is always the beginning of something better. You are not broken, you are wired, and wiring can change.